One of the base ratios that we want to deal with is a measure called times interest earned. Consider this problem. The Hopkins Corporation has $1 million of debt outstanding, and it pays an interest rate of 8% annually. Hopkins' annual sales are $5 million, its average tax rate is 40%, and its net profit margin on sales is 8%. And what we're asked to find is the times interest earned. So here is a problem that both involves working with the income statement, as we've got it laid out over here, and coming up with the measure times interest earned. Now the measure itself, what it's asking is when we get down here to our earnings before we pay our interest and taxes, our next opportunity here is to pay our interest, and it answers the question, how many times could we have paid it? Not that we're going to pay it more than once, but it gives an indication of how much leeway we have on this fixed interest commitment. So what this is going to be looking for is the earnings before interest and tax divided by the interest expense that we would have here. So we're going to need to come up with both of those items, the EBIT and the interest expense, in order to come up with this correct calculation over here. Now we start with a few things. It tells us up here that our sales is at $5 million. Now a couple things that we can deal with right off the bat here is it's going to tell us some information coming from the top down and from the bottom up as we're working our way on this. And in particular, it tells us a little bit here with respect to what our interest expense is going to be. So one of the components that we have, the denominator in here on this times interest earned. And what it says is our interest expense is at 8% on this debt of $1 million. So we know what we've got in here is an $80,000 interest expense. Now, the other piece that it tells us is this net profit margin on sales. In other words, the bottom line figure, net income, divided by sales is equal to 8%. So if we simply take this 8% and multiply it by the level of our sales, we have our bottom line figure that we're going to earn net income of $400,000. Now the taxes that come in here represent 40% times whatever this earnings before tax figure is going to be. So what we need to do here is to come up with this earnings before tax. Now the earnings before tax, 40% of that number is the $400,000 here. So if we wanted to work our way back around this, what we would find is that earnings before taxes times this 40% equals the $400,000. So if we took the $400,000 figure that we have here and recognize that dividing that by 1 minus this tax rate tells us that with a $666,667 earnings before tax, 40% of that taken out of here is the amount $266,667, and that would leave us with the $400,000 that we had found to begin with. Working our way back up here then, earnings before interest and tax, when you subtract this out, is going to give you this amount right here. So we could simply add together the earnings before tax and that interest expense to find us what the prior figure would have been. So 746 minus that 80,000. Altogether, that gives us a times interest earned, again, as we said, which was the ratio of our earnings before interest and tax to interest expense. And it says that you could have paid this 9 1/3 times.